This is the Steele Report.
This week on the Steele Report, on the eve of the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, my guest is an Iowa civil rights icon, Mae Weems. We think so much of Mae's place in Waterloo history that among the pictures gracing the large mural in the lobby of the renovated KWWL building is this 1959 photograph of Mae with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when she persuaded Reverend King to come to Waterloo in 1959. Mae Weems on the Steele Report, and our program begins right now.
Now from KWWL, this is the Steele Report.
My four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
That is one of the most famous speeches in American history, delivered on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. on August 28, 1963. Less than 5 years before he would fall victim to an assassin's bullet coming from James Earl Ray on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis on April 4th, 1968. And today we remember Dr. King's legacy with two guests who certainly have a keen interest in continuing that legacy. And one of our guests today, of course, is probably one of the most important Iowa civil rights activists of our time, certainly of almost the last century. Mae Weems joins us here today as we air this program on the day before our nation observes the annual federal holiday honoring the late Martin Luther King Jr., always celebrated, of course, on the third Monday of January. Now, in marches and demonstrations, Mae Weems fought against racial discrimination on so many fronts. As an active participant in the civil rights movement, she was the local NAACP president, for example, for many years. I've also asked, of course, my good friend, our KWWL sports director, Rick Coleman, a native of Waterloo, whose parents came to Waterloo from Mississippi, to join us for this special program as Mae reflects on her decades of very vocal activism and helping lead the Iowa civil rights movement. And I also want to mention that tonight at the Electric Park Ballroom in Waterloo is the 40th annual Martin Luther King Jr. banquet. And Rick, there's a special guest, I think, for tonight too, right?
Yeah, Vivica Fox, the great actress, but she's also an activist as well. Is going to be speaking at the banquet tonight. From many popular films like Independence Day with Will Smith back in 1996. But she's done a lot on the big screen as well as the small screen. So Vivica Fox will be there today.
So as we air our program here today, that banquet is coming up tonight at the Electric Park Ballroom, part of, I believe, 40 years of the Martin Luther King banquet here in Waterloo. So let's begin with Mae Weems by talking about the fact that Dr. King came to Waterloo 3 different times, and you were involved in bringing him here all 3 of those times. So how did you get to meet him, and how did that happen?
I'm glad you asked the question. I wondered myself sometime, when was it? I have a difficult time to really telling it, but it was always during a march. We had word, I was with the State Federation of Labor, and our word was they needed us in certain places. So all we had to do was to get on a plane and go to Chicago. And in the airport there, they would have a plane put out by the Federation of Labor to take us to where we were needed. So we didn't go to where King was or Abernathy was. We just went where they sent us. And every time I went there, I was fortunate enough to see this great leader. The first time I saw him was he just got out of jail, and they were trying to talk to him about what happened. And he was saying, let me have a drink of water. Let me get a bath. Let me do this first of all. And I got to think, you have to do all that? You know, I don't know if I was really ready for that. And then, but I was excited about the idea that we should participate. I was with Local 46, United Packing House Workers.
And you heard him speak and said something like, we have got to get this guy to Waterloo, right? Yeah.
And I walked up to him and just said, you got to come. Waterloo got to hear you pray. Got to hear you pray. And he said, well, I'll be willing to go.
What were some of the great impressions that he touched on you as not only just a leader, but also a human being?
It wasn't so much that. I couldn't understand how they could sit at a counter and not say anything. That resistance, I couldn't understand. Because I'm a mouthy person, and I'm a physical person, and I couldn't understand we have to sit at a counter and not say a word. So it was very, very a learning process. and a disciplinary thing where people had great discipline for justice.
And his, of course, message was nonviolence.
Nonviolence.
And by the time he came to Waterloo in 1959, though, he was gaining popularity, he was becoming well known, and like you, he was kind of viewed as a troublemaker, wasn't he?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And Dr. Abernathy came with him, if you remember. And I bought a 100-voice choir. Can you imagine, at this day and age, bringing a 100-voice choir from Chicago to sing for a man who just come out of Mississippi being beaten up so bad? And we don't know who paid for it, but our community paid for it. That's why I'm so happy to thank the educational system, the people in business here who made it possible for us to have Martin Luther King here those 3 times. Because the man just died, John Derry Sr.
Right.
He paid for everything.
John Derry Sr., right, yeah.
Every time Martin Luther King came here.
The 1955 visit, his first visit to Waterloo, came at a time when the Montgomery bus boycott was in progress, because it started in December of 1955, went all the way to December of 1956. Dr. King came here during that period, did he not? Yeah.
And people here weren't for that. There was a lot of opposition, a lot of opposition. And Dr. Abernathy accompanied him here.
This was a movement of inclusion, of not only African Americans trying to move forward, but also involving the other community, the white community.
Right.
And that was the only way that movement could gain momentum, by showing that, you know, how things were for African Americans in this country. Some of the things that happened in the South, the sheriff hosing down the African Americans who were marching peacefully. How did that, talk about how that movement just continued to gain momentum?
I'm trying to think. I didn't know what question you'd be asking me, but let me think what happened. When you go there, you have a guy with dogs, you have dogs, and you have to stay in a line. These dogs will bite you if you get out of line. That was the first experience. The second experience would be they had the hoses, and if they hose you down. So there was so much cruel treatment if you violated the rules in the South. So my job was to make sure these books got in these schools. And we did not help only black people in the South. It was white people who couldn't read and knew write.
One of the things, though, that helped advance African Americans locally was the bidding process within the unions. Didn't that help people find jobs? And you were involved in that.
Labor did it.
Yeah.
Labor has not got the credit.
I wanted to bring up a 2015 article that appeared in the Courier, written by my good friend Pat Kinney, who has, of course, since retired from the Courier. Great a writer for the Courier for many years. But the opening line was in 2015. I think this was when you were one of the 8 over 80 recipients that year. And Pat started his piece by saying, some folks in Waterloo still think of Mae Weems as a troublemaker. But I've heard you say that you believe all these years you were misunderstood.
Yes.
So what did you mean by that?
Well, I was following the leader, and when I was beaten, I was not causing trouble. I was there giving an old woman who had been hung from a tree.
Wow.
They mistaken her. They thought she was a man. They mistaken her. I helped to get her down, and I got caught up in that. So
just the injustice of it all. Yeah,
that's right. You can't imagine. You have to be there.
Rick and I will continue our discussion with Mae Weems in just a moment. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Steele Report as Rick and I continue our discussion with civil rights icon Mae Weems.
Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
I've known you a long time. You've been like family.
Yes.
You know, my family definitely knows yours. But I remember you involving me in this program that you got with C.T. Vivian, who was appointed by Dr. King to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And you brought him here back in the late 70s, early 80s to start the Urban Potential Program, where he educated not only business leaders, but white business leaders, community leaders, about race relations. And I remember being a part of one of those little groups that
Did you survive?
Yes, I did survive. But I remember it being very educational for me because I, you know, as a young African American, didn't really understand what had gone on.
Well, the thing about it was we couldn't understand racism. We couldn't understand racism. And then I had to, what we were teaching in that program was racism is evil. Racism is bad. Racism separates, it divides. Racism is un-American. And above all, racism was a sin. That's why we wanted the ministers in there. We who were born with color and those without color, that wasn't our fault, but we're still brothers and sisters. And so we got on this racism, and that's how we made it with the minister, by showing them that God made us, those with color. And then you see those without color, their #1 product is suntan lotion. So I don't know how we're going to settle that.
Yeah. And C.T. Vivian, a historic leader, in 2013, President Obama presented him with the Presidential Medal of Freedom because of all that he's done. He even said at that time, Reverend, that C.T. Vivian inspired him, Obama, to be the leader that he was.
C.T. Vivian, I started Urban Potential, and I had him one of my speakers. And every time I could get him, I could use a speaker, because C.T. was very good in bringing the point to them. He would say to them, how would you feel because you're white without color? You think people should beat you every day? You had to make, he was good at that. And now he's very ill. C.T.'s very ill in Atlanta, Georgia. And I don't know if it's dementia or what it is, but he's very ill.
You've always said, though, to young people, stay in school. Take advantage of that great equalizer, which is education. So, Rick, what do you remember about Anna Mae when you were just a child watching her in action here? What impressed you the most about her?
Well, it's just what you mentioned, education. I mean, she, at the time, I was a little bit confused as a young person. She helped me get into Russ College in Holly Springs, Mississippi. I mean, to start my formal education. And she was also persistent about employment. You know, we called it the unemployment office, but she was the employment. She employed a lot of people. She made sure a lot of not only African Americans, but all Americans.
You know, some of the demonstrations that you took part in and probably helped organize in Waterloo, there were sometimes more whites attending those than blacks, because blacks were fearful of causing trouble, weren't they? Because particularly if they had jobs, they might be fired by their white employers, right?
Martin Luther King said, walk together, children, don't get weary. Don't cause trouble. If you see it, go away from it. And so that, I didn't want to bring it down there. So what we did, we got to the place where we had a confusion. We go to what they call the captains. And I learned to do nonviolent. That's why I got beaten up so bad. But the real success of mine was not that I got beaten. I was working for the White House. I went to the White House. And that person got beat up. That's what drew the attention. That was the difference.
Wow. And you worked at Rath for a short time, but then you got a big break because you got a chance to work for the union, correct?
Vice president.
Vice president of the union, and you went in there and you started making waves right away.
Yeah, they worked with me. We worked together. We saw Phil Clarkson. We saw all of them worked together. It wasn't the secretaries. It was the unions that freed us. The union, labor unions. And when I was coming back to Waterloo, I told them we were coming back, and they said, no, don't come back, the black preachers. They didn't want to hear Martin Luther King.
I was kind of struck by the fact that even a lot of African Americans had their doubts about Martin Luther King. They were fearful that he was causing too much trouble, right?
Right. They said, okay, when I came back, they said, Miss Weems, we can't lose what we got messing with Martin Luther King. He's got everything. Martin Luther King had nothing. That night he preached. He was just saying, he felt it. And he walked the street fearless. He said that we've got to get out there and do something about it. And he said, don't walk with me, walk ahead of me.
And that was the speech where I've been to the mountaintop.
I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Now, one thing I was going to say about Anna Mae, she has fearless persistence about getting. I remember this was back maybe 20 years ago. You got Peter Coors from the Coors. I mean, Peter Coors, the president of Coors. You got him here to speak, and he talked about that. He said the reason why I'm here today to speak to this group of businessmen is because Anna Mae Weems got me on the phone. And you don't give up.
But what I really want to say too, I appreciate you remembering that. There's so many, God has been so good to me, I can't take all the credit. There's another guy, fearless as me. His name is Jeff Sabato. I bet he's been with me for a long time. Every time we do, there are always some whites with us. This has not been a black struggle alone. It's been white, all preachers, businessmen. I'm proud of Waterloo. So Jeff Zappito started a thing called CBBC, Coalition to Build a Better Community. And he has all the people, I gave you the names of people here, who was over there at the bank was started, the community bank started. All they do is a problem come up in this community. And the membership is made of all doctors, lawyers, professionals. We give it to somebody in that thing to take care of it. We have no dues, no meeting dates. We have no certain place to meet. When you have a problem, we get those people, they go meet it. The money's they pay for their own. And so Jeff got this going, and he's done a tremendous job. And we did the Logan Plaza thing. We did a lot of things we can't mention. But I want you to know that CBBC, Coalition to Build a Better Community, is one of the things that Martin could be real proud of.
Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
We'll continue our conversation with Anna Mae Weems in just a moment. Welcome back to this week's edition of the Steele Report as we conclude our discussion with civil rights icon Anna Mae Weems right now.
I do see that we do have segregation. I do see the EEOC is still filing complaints. I do see that people are trying to use the N-word. So we got a lot of work to do. We're not going to deny it. We're going to work with the governor. She gave a good speech yesterday, and in her speech, she said what she wants to do, make a better community. We're going to have to help her. And one way we can help her is not hang on to the speech, but thank the speech for coming up to give us the idea and the ambition that we're going to do something about it.
What do you say? I mean, being a resident here for 93 years, all the struggles and fight that you've put into making this a better community, what would you say? I
told Frida that question will come up. She said, oh, they won't now with Martin Luther King. I'm glad you asked it because it's so important. I don't know who made the report, but it's alarming. And we have to shut the alarm off, wake up. I was with the governor last week. She's concerned about that too. Mm-hmm. So we started an organization, a group of people called the Coalition to Unity in the Community. We're going to go to all of you. We're going to beat them. We're glad they called to our attention. We're going to change it. We know everybody in this community has talent. We can use everybody. Everybody is needed in this community. And we're going to show our leadership. And we're going to make it a better community. That's what Coalition, the better community. And we need as many people to sign up as they want to. And not only that, we go through the whole state. And we have a program called Up Close. We bring this whole thing with all our equipment and everything that Jeff Dapido and the Coalition and Dan Derry does, pays for all of this. And we let the kids see up close Martin Luther King, KWWL, KBBG. They see the people. We make a difference in people's lives.
When you were growing up as a child in Waterloo, you were born in 1926.
Yes.
So coming up on February 6th, Anna Mae is going to be 93 years old. I don't think she might.
93 years young.
93 years young. She's very spry. She actually came to the station on her own here today to do the interview. But in Waterloo in those days when you were growing up, no preschools, no early childhood education, no black teachers. You went to, I believe you said, Grant, the old Grant School, and then Logan Junior High School, and it was downtown where City Hall is now. And then you graduated from Waterloo East High School. You were in the band because, of course, music's a big part of your life. Was there ever a time, though, when you said to yourself, "This is just too difficult"? What was the hardest time?
No, since you're doing that, let's go back. We were paid 25 cents a day to keep those hogs moving around till the train got back and they loaded back on the cars.
25 cents a day.
I've been there.
One thing you said that struck me earlier, I think you did an interview with Dr. David Jackson III a few years back, and you told him that you grew up poor, but you didn't realize you were poor.
No, no. We would go to church, we would go to school and see kids eating and wonder how can they eat and we not eat, you know? And that's what we got to do. I've been there. I see how they feel, how they felt about people having good lunches, nice clothes, you know. And we'd walk, 30-degree weather, 30 below zero, we walked. Now we have a car. So I want to make sure that the kids understand that instead of all these things like this, they got to start reading, they got to start writing, they got to, I am now, Frida and I are over our grandchildren. My grandchildren, Frida's nephews, there's 6 of them. My son had a stroke. And they never went to school. They had school in the home. They only went to school about 11 days in their life or 11 months in their life. So we had to bring them. They are now A students.
Fantastic.
Frida has done a good job. And there's more out there that's like that. And we got to, not only us, but it's out there. Everybody got to work together.
You mentioned Frida, that's your daughter, Frida Weems. In fact, I'll just say that Frida, a few years back, lined up an interview for me to interview Martin Luther King III when he came to the University of Northern Iowa. So Frida, I think I thanked you before, but I thank you again for a wonderful opportunity to interview that young man.
And you know what? Not only that, I want the people to know that Martin Luther King has been here 3 times. His family has been here numerous times. Frida and the King children are real close. They've been here all the time. And I want them to know that we have a lot of people who know them, and it's all right to know them, but we got to be like King. We got to be friends to each other. We have to live in this community. And I'm excited about our community. I know we're getting a bad eye to it now, but I'm excited what can happen. I think we can make a difference. And when they hear our report that you're giving here now, and I hope people will write you and ask you about our program, how to get it from you, you'll have it to give to them. And Rick, you could probably preach for them.
You do a great job of preaching.
Well, let's just talk one more thing about Dr. King. What do you think left you with the greatest impression of Dr. King before his very, very tragic assassination in 1968?
I have 2 people that impressed me. One, the guy Cunningham, he came here, and Cunningham wrote a letter to one of my...
You mean Walter Cunningham?
Yes.
Yes, of course.
He wrote a letter he signed a letter while he was here to my granddaughter, Yeshi, who was in Washington. She was chief of staff for agriculture. She ran for the here and lost, but she came here. He told her, keep your eyes straight, shoot for the stars. She had a baby, her baby's named DeWitt, and he is on this thing with Cunningham. Now, getting back to what we said about what we should do, we have a lot of people here who are missing the mark because there's no encouragement. There's no, so I'm going to say this. We have to know that we can't make it by ourselves. The school system, Tara Thomas is doing a fantastic job. Her staff. We got a new guy with the administration now. One is named Kingsley. He's with Human Resource. We have a first known pharmacist. We bring some good people in now who's going to help us lift our standards. And we appreciate what you've done for us here. And when you open this corner up here, it gave encouragement to the whole street down here. You opened the door for us. I thank you for that. We needed KWL to do that. So I'm asking you to accept us and encourage people to work with us. When we took that march down the street and came in those places, I looked and saw no blacks working. We've got to get better. There are no blacks working. We still have segregation. Don't let it be true. We can do something about it.
Mae Weems, thank you very much. It's always a privilege to be around you. Rick Coleman, my good friend, thanks, Rick, for coming on. And of course, Mae, thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's it for this week on the Steele Report. And of course, as always, we're online on kwwl.com, and we'll see you right here again next week. Thanks for watching.